What's up, my fellow scruffy looking nerf herders, and welcome to the Carbonite Chat. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Solo movie. I'm going to start off trying to be fairly spoiler free. So in case, I know a few people wanted to wait for my review on whether or not to watch it. For the most part, the movie doesn't even really have anything to spoil. There's really only two moments that I think are really even spoiler warnings, and one I knew of before the movie happened, and I'm sure you probably do too. It's a cameo. But before I get into that, I'll do the non-spoiler part and then get to just basically going through the entire movie. For the first, if you're going to this movie, there's going to be, it's interesting in that there's going to be you liking it. Whether or not you like this movie is going to tell me or anyone that really knows what you go to Star Wars movies for. Because it's got the action adventure side of a Star Wars movie. And if you're wanting to just turn off your brain, sit down and watch a kind of fast-paced movie with a lot of action that has a lot of stuff going on, and then also in some sense doesn't, but you're going to enjoy this. It would not surprise me to hear a lot of people that's only seen this movie once say that they enjoyed it. You don't want to think too deeply into it. This movie is not one that's gonna, the adventure side of A New Hope, where you can dig into it and it keeps getting better with every viewing. This one, it's gonna start to break down a little bit. You're gonna start to recognize that there's some flaws in this, and there's some things that just really don't pay off as well. If you are on the downside of Disney, but not to the point of boycotting, then this movie benefits from low expectations. The fact that I didn't walk out of the movie absolutely horribly mad was a benefit to the movie, because the last movie I saw, I did. So it was a benefit there. It's basically, though, the big issue is, I'm not going to try to act like I can see every time that that there's the two different directors. There are some obvious moments. Well, not say obvious, but the opening, you can tell that was a Ron Howard scene. That was very much, with the opening action set that we kind of had, was very much a Ron Howard thing. And there was some moments that I can kind of bet on were probably Lord and Miller. I'm not going to go like other reviewers that basically just say anytime there's a funny moment, that was Lord and Miller, and anytime there wasn't a funny moment, then it was Ron Howard. But there are some specific moments, particularly on a scene towards the end of the second act, where there's kind of this rebellion going on, that definitely seemed more Lord and Miller than Ron Howard. But I think the biggest thing that you can notice with two different directors is the acting with both Lando and Han. Now, to get to the kind of meat of the question, first off, Lando I thought was really good. The first scene that we meet him in, I thought he was incredible. I thought I was shocked, honestly, because if you looked at what I said prior to them with the trailers coming out, I didn't think he was going to be that spectacular. I was kind of let down. Everyone was going on and on about how great he was going to be, and I was saying, yeah, I'm not sold on him. And as I said, if he changed in the movie, I would admit it, and he did. Now for the Han thing. I've heard a lot of the same things being said, and I think I kind of figured it out. Is Alden Ehrenreich Han Solo? No. If you are just as anti as you can be about him, then you're going to hate it. If you're, let me see how it's going to go, you're going to be like most everyone, which is going to be till about the point he meets Lando. Then you're going to start to just be into it, and you're going to be okay with what goes on from that point forward. And here's why. And here's why I say he's not Han Solo. Because if you ever see him by himself, or with a character that we don't know Han hangs out with prior, that we've seen Han and Chewie together, or Han and Lando together, when he's not with them, that's when you don't buy him. But when he's with them, you do. And I think it's because your mind tricks itself. It says, nah, this is, when I see Chewie and I see somebody back talking with him, that's Han. And then with Lando, the same thing. And both Lando and Chewie do it so well that you just buy into Han in those scenes. And not that it's like he's terrible, and if you just didn't look at him, that, you know, if you didn't look at Chewie and Lando, you would be like, wow, this is so terrible. But it helps you accept it more. Some of the things that are really not Han Solo, it allows you to accept them because you just accept the scenario that you're in, which is why at the beginning, everyone's like, yeah, he was kind of rough at the beginning. And that's because you see him with qi'ra, and then you see him at war. Two things we've never seen of him before, really, Han. I mean, we saw him a little bit in battle on Endor, but outside of that, we've not really seen him in war as, like, you know, from the original trilogy. So when we see this, and we see him in this battle scenario, it doesn't fit. And also, the cinematography. I love Bradford Young. Arrival was great. I thought Selma, outside of one or two shots, was very brilliantly done. Most Violent Year, very well done. I did not think the tone, the color, the darkness that he went for in this movie fit the tone of the movie. The movie was more upbeat. And I say that because Mim Bam particularly had kind of a bluish tint to it. There was this fog. It really wasn't clear as much to see so much of what was going on, and it doesn't fit Han. It didn't fit, to me, this movie. But there were some great shots by him, and he's a talented person, and he tried to use practical effects, and for the most part, if you just look at it by a picture, you're like, that works well, but it doesn't work for this movie, in my mind. But Han, once he kind of meets up with Chewbacca, that meetup is really good in my mind. They work really well together. And then once he gets with Lando and he sits down and they start to play sabacc, that's when you start to feel like, okay, you just kind of forget a little bit. Now again, some people are not going to forget. And then some people are going to say he's amazing. And I can kind of understand both. And that's where I kind of come in the middle. That I think he's passable. I think he's a talented actor. I think it's unfortunate that happened to him, that they had to switch directors, and it probably messed up his ability to hone into playing Solo, and that may be a part of his up and down caricature. But I believe that ultimately, that what it really is that when he's with other people and not focused on, you say, oh, that's Han, that's Chewie, that's Lando, I get this. But when it's just him, or it's him and qi'ra, you're like, that's not Han in love. That's not Han trying to... And you can say, oh yeah, he's only 19 here, and you know later he's 29. I don't buy into that. It's the same thing that they tried to play with the Luke thing, and I'll get into that a little bit later with some of how it doesn't quite hold up. But ultimately, that's my feelings on Han without getting too far into kind of like spoilers or what's going on. The casting, I thought, was 50-50. Okay, I will say 75-25. The biggest issue I have is, I mean, it's hard to sit there and watch it and not think Anthony and Gruber would have been a better choice. But in all honesty, Han does not take away from the movie, or Alden Ehrenreich does not take away from the movie. I think the writing was one of the lowest things. Lando is a great hire. Woody Harrelson plays Woody Harrelson. If you like Woody Harrelson being Woody Harrelson, you're going to like probably most of his characterization. Thandie Newton as Val was really good. Rio Durant, it's the alien with four arms. He at first bothered me with having Jon Favreau's voice, but after a little bit I kind of was okay with it. And then L3 was horrible. I despise that character. It was so bad. It didn't fit with what was going on with the movie. It was a side thing. It was harping on. It was if you hated Canto Bight and you hate, well, no, I won't say that. L3's, she was just terrible. I can't say much more without spoiling, probably. I did not enjoy that character. There was one moment that I found humorous, a conversation between her and qi'ra. And then speaking of qi'ra, Emilia Clarke is a terrible actress. She's awful. She got lucky being able to be in Game of Thrones. And they basically try to hide her acting ability. And so she's gotten some big movies like Terminator and now this. And she can't act. She is awful. Just all it is. She is terrible. To end kind of my non-spoilery kind of thoughts on the movie, I don't know where to place it. If you're boycott. Wait until it comes out in January. There's not really anything spoilery that's going to like ruin the fact that you waited. And I think it would be, I think you could consider it a good Netflix movie. Like the fact that people love the Netflix TV shows that Marvel puts out because they're on Netflix, they didn't just pay a bunch of money to go watch it in the theaters, is essentially the same as how this movie is. It's more like the Indiana Jones Chronicles in that the movie doesn't flow real well at points, and because it's trying to tell you here's how this happened, here's how this happened, here's Han on Corellia for a little while, here's Han with the Empire for a little while, here's Han's first job, here's Han's first time flying, here's Han, what is going to happen. But it feels like it was more like a series of TV episodes that were put into it. So you just imagine, Jessica Jones or, one of the Daredevil or some of those Netflix things, how it's a, 8-hour TV Netflix series. That's what you're waiting for. And if you wait till December or January when it comes out on Netflix, you're probably going to be like, oh, that was enjoyable. Because if you want to accept into it and buy into it, it's very easy to do so. But once you start to dig a little bit deeper, think about some of the stuff that happens, there's a problem. The one other thing that I will kind of give praise to the movie for is its humor. I thought this was some of the best humor. It's not a hilariously funny movie, so don't take me wrong on that. But I think it could have been funnier if, again, the tone of the visuals would have been adjusted a little bit and brightened the movie up a little bit. It would have allowed you to feel like things are a little bit happier, as opposed to the constant darks that was just the practical lighting and the shadows constantly left in that was trying to play this noir where it didn't really feel like a noir for most of the movie. And so I think that the humor was Star Wars humor, and I think that comes to Lawrence Kasdan's writing. He gets Star Wars humor. I think really Empire Strikes Back is one of the funnier movies out of the whole, which is funny because everyone talks about it being so dark because of the themes that it deals with, but there's so many little moments because Kasdan is really brilliant at putting humorous moments in the conversations and fitting the characters and back and forth and comments that work really well. And this movie did that well. It did not have the Last Jedi crap humor of sight gags here and there just to try to make 2-year-olds laugh. Instead, it had the adventure to excite kids, which is what Star Wars is about. It's action adventure, not action comedy. And it didn't have this Marvel humor, which is, it didn't have to, in the middle of an action scene, have to have quick jokes, humorous, like quips constantly, which is what Force Awakens really tried to do. And that was a problem. But it had, when there's action scenes, when there's serious moments, it for the most part allowed it to be serious. It kept its tone when it was between humor or serious. And I really appreciated that. And there was some legitimately funny Star Wars moments, like humor for Star Wars in this movie. And I appreciate that. As far as my opinion, if you're on the fence, if you just want to go watch an enjoyable film, you can be entertained. This is not a horrible movie. This is not a bad movie. For me, I place it above the prequels. I need to watch it I need to wait to be able to watch it again to really judge whether or not I place it above Revenge of the Sith or not. It's kind of even with those. I do not like the prequels. So if you really like the prequels, you're going to probably change. You're not going to agree with me on that. But it definitely, I don't know, it's hard to judge. It's very middle of the road is my feelings on it. And now I'll get into the spoiler thing. Starting off with the movie, it tries to do basically this Disney-esque version of the crawl. Basically perfect Disney of we want to pretend like we're not copying anything. We want to do our own thing. So we're not going to do the crawl, but we're going to put text in space to explain what happens before the movie starts. Where it's like we're just going to do a lesser version to try to act like we're not doing, to separate it, to show that we're different from them. And it was just stupid. Just have the crawl, man. Why can't you have the crawl? Because here's what needs to happen. The crawl should have been here so that we didn't have this first bit of the movie. Because this first bit of the movie is pointless. It does nothing. It wastes time, and it could have been passed off and never been shown. Because it does nothing. You meet Fagin, or also known in this movie as Lady Proxima, because all this is Oliver Twist. If you read Oliver Twist, this is solo Oliver Twist Act 1, where he's in this place and he's got to do these things to be able to be protected and have food, and then he has to go see Fagin, which is Lady Proxima, who kind of oversees everything. My question is, why did she have to have a normal voice? Moloch, which is the person that kind of captures Han and brings him in, is speaking an alien language, which for those of you who have hated that there hasn't been a lot of aliens, there is a lot more aliens in this movie than there's been in prior movies. But why did she have to have her, stupid old lady voice that just kind of, I didn't like the character to begin with. It just felt weird to me the entire time. Like, why is she doing that? And then the other thing that kind of bothered me with this is they find he has the coaxium, which is like the running thing throughout it. Apparently they're going to hammer down fuel in this whole Disney thing. Everything's going to be about fuel from now on. We're going to learn that, fuel is what wars are fought over and all this stuff. But anyways, they first get it and Qi'ra says, oh, this is worth 500 to 600 credits. Okay. Then later, when she's talking to the woman, she's like, it's worth 800 or more credits for sure. And then at the end of the movie, it's basically the same size. There is a little crystal inside of it as opposed to the other one, but it seems basically close to the same. And then when he goes to the end and hands in, he goes, this should be worth about 10,000 credits. Why is this worth? It just seemed like it was worth whatever they needed it to be worth at the time. And then like when there was a whole bunch of them, there was 60 million credits, but I'm not counting them all to figure out if the math pays off. Maybe I missed something here. I very clearly could have missed something there. But that kind of bothered me a little bit. And then you have her doing her little, shaking thing where she's just kind of poking up with her stupid voice that should have just been an alien, just like Moloch was. And then Han's talking to her and he pulls out a rock and goes, and she's like, clearly that's a rock, and clearly you just made the noise with your mouth. Why did no one shoot them? They were about to shoot him until he says, I've got a grenade, and holds it up. She can clearly see it's a rock. She says it's a rock. She says he just did that with his mouth. But yeah, no one does anything. I mean, I get that this is Star Wars and little things get by, and that's one of those things that Han's just kind of always lucky. He tries these crazy things and ends up pulling them off. I get it. So I probably need to, but I was like, in the moment, it's mainly just that whole scene. It all should have been gone. So then he runs off, and you have the Ron Howard getting to have his car kind of thing happen, which it was okay. There's nothing memorable. There's nothing special. You get to see the dice, which the dice, like, it's just like, oh, there's dice that are constantly shown throughout the movie, but there's nothing to them at all. It's just like, oh, here's the dice again. Up, here's the dice again. Up, here's the dice again. Like, I get it. There's dice. Like, why are you why? So they're running off, and it does nothing, but it sets up that Han cares for Qi'ra, and that's going to be his motivation for the movie, even though he finds her almost immediately afterwards. So it kind of kills that motivation, so it has to reset up another motivation that doesn't really pay off, and there's nothing. Like I said, you can't think too deep about the movie. This movie is completely at the surface level. There's not much deeper to this at all. So he begins to kind of go off, and he tries to do this move. And this is one of the other things that it sets up, that later on he's going to try to repeat this with the Millennium Falcon, but it works out. We didn't need to see this here. And then further proof that we didn't need to see this, they try to get away, and Han ends up joins in with everyone to the Empire. Man, I just went completely mind blank there. He joins in with the Empire to be able to, basically he wants to become a pilot and try to get back so that he can rescue Qi'ra. I don't want to just follow the story, but I want to try to break down the important points, so I may skip over stuff. But then you have the worst moment in the entire, probably in the entire movie. And that's, they give him the name Solo because he doesn't know anyone. It was just like, oh man, why? Why can't his name just be Han Solo? Why did you have to have that moment with the worst delivery ever? Like, it wasn't even done well. It wasn't written well. It was a terrible idea, written terribly. It was just awful. And then it basically cuts to him on Membam in the middle of the war. That's what it should have been. That's where it should have started. You should have had, it's just, if there's something that could have existed where you could have had these paragraphs that explained, kind of some information that you need to have an idea of prior, so that it could set up the story, so that you didn't have to see that, something like, paragraphs running through space. I don't know. If they could have had something like that, that would have been really nice, because we wouldn't have had to see that crap. But even without that, it jumps forward after he meets with Beckett and them, and he explains everything that happened. He explains, I need to get back to find this girl. I was trying to get away. We grew up together, and I got away, but she didn't, and I got to get back there. Okay, that's his motivation. That's going to be killed like 10 seconds later, but that's his motivation. He tells us everything that happens on Vandar 1, on that planet. He tells us everything that happened in Act 1. He tells it to Val and Beckett. So why did we need to see it? Why? It doesn't make any sense to me. It should have just started out in this moment, and everything's going on. It kind of looks cool. Again, I don't like the color. The problem with The Dark Knight is it was so great, and everyone chalked it up to nothing but darkness. And so everyone has tried to go dark. And now the cinematographers have all just started to let's just turn everything down. Let's turn the saturation down. Let's make it darker. Let's play with the oranges a bit. Or, let's set the fog playing with some little blue tints here and there. But let's make it dark and grimy. And that'll make the movie better, because Dark Knight was dark. Hence Dark Knight. And that was the only reason it was good. It wasn't because incredible writing, incredible pacing, great acting, and a great story. That doesn't have anything to do with it. We need to just make sure things look darker. And that bothers me, because again, it just does not fit what's going on. But then he sees people going on. Well, one big issue with Beckett is the spinning. He shoots and he has to spin the guns every time. Shoot. It's like if you would have let that be the only time it happened, so that it kind of catches your eye and it says, hey, we need to focus on this character. That would have been good screen direction. Would have been like, hey, here's what's going on. See the guy spinning? Boom, let's look at it. But it was endless throughout the entire movie. He's constantly spinning everything. It's like, oh my God, I get it. You can spin something. That's so stupid. So then Han sees him. And he's like, oh, this guy looks cool. Let me come over here and see what's happening. They have a little conversation. The back and forth is pretty good. They have some little, why did you have to have these comments thrown into the conversation? It was clearly like, oh, by the way, this is the Star Wars universe. Look, we said words, But then they end up going, and everything works out. So Han's trying to follow them and trying to talk to Beckett about, like, hey, who are you? What's going on? Let me follow with you. And they're like, no, you stick to being a soldier. And Han realizes something's going on. So he's following them. But then all of a sudden he just stops following them. Even though he wants to leave to go with them. He just stops following them and just kind of joins in with this group, where another lieutenant's talking about their plan. And this is only here so that Han can kind of voice his complaints about the Empire. It's just like, oh, here's where you were going. Take a little step over here and say, oh, I don't like this. We're the people. We're the empires. We're the people that's hostile to what's going on this planet. Okay, you're always trouble, Han Solo. How come you have to be trouble? That you dang Han Solo? And then everyone leaves, and then he walks back to going to Beckett and them. It was like, why was this here? Oh, we got to know that Han's trouble. There's a lot of that where it's almost like fourth wall break. Like, oh, by the way, this. And I'll get to them more as we go forward. But he starts to talk to Beckett. And Beckett's doing his Brad Pitt impression, which is, if you don't know, Brad Pitt in every movie where he tries to play like the cool guys is always just constantly eating because it makes you look cooler when you're doing something, because it's like, I'm so cool. While things are going on, I'm just going to be eating because I'm so relaxed and calm. And we kind of get the feel of their group, which I like. And then he calls over, Han tries to blackmail him to get in. And this is kind of key for what happens later, because when I first saw it, I was like, that doesn't make any sense, because later, spoilers already obviously, Beckett, for no shock to anyone in the world, ends up betraying Han. Well, when he betrays Han, Han knew he was going to betray him and says, hey, you said people are predictable. So are you. And I was like, he's not done, how is this predictable? We haven't seen, but then I kind of remembered that actually he did kind of like quickly betray Han. Not really betray Han, but because Han like kind of challenged him, he was like, all right, I'll turn you in and let you die. I don't care. And so maybe that's the only thing that could be there that could say it. But the big thing that happens here is he gets taken to the Beast, which to no one's surprise, the second he said the Beast, I was like, oh, it's Chewie. This movie is incredibly predictable, by the way. If you're wanting to be shocked or surprised, it's not that. And that's not terribly bad, because I did enjoy this scene. Question, they said Tag and Bink was going to be in this. I don't remember directly seeing them, but my question for bringing that up here is, are those two stormtroopers them? Because they were kind of funny a little bit. Like, one of them was yelling down, was like, kill him slower. And again, that was fitting humor. It was two kind of oddball stormtroopers that were overseeing this. Needless to say, he gets thrown down there. The Beast walks in and it's Chewie, which is interesting because clearly Chewie eats humans, which I kind of like the fact that happens. But they start fighting. It was weird how long they had Han doing the talking Shriwook, or however you say it, Shriwook. Yeah, I'm not going to keep trying to repeatedly say it improperly. Speak Wookiee. It went on a little long, and that was one of those that I felt maybe could have been the Lord Miller thing. I don't see that being something that Ron Howard's like, drag this on longer. But then again, he did do the Grinch, so who knows? But I liked it. I liked this. It's not how they met in Legends, but it's all right. It was an enjoyable scene for the most part. It really started to bond them together, even though not like directly immediately like they're best buds, but it kind of built a camaraderie in how they got together. And again, this is where it begins to get better for Han, because he does well, because Chewie does really well. The new actor, Jonas, or whatever his name is. And he does better with other people around. And this begins it. Han, then they had one scene right after this that was kind of bothered me. Like, it's not bothering me, it's not a big issue, but it's like, why did you have to have the shower scene? Why was that there? It was like, oh, this needs to be here because this will be funny. But it didn't fit in the moments of what was, whatever, that's nitpicky. I did like Rio there, where he was talking about like, you've never had such a good sleep as when you've laid in the lap of a Wookiee. As I said, Rio kind of built on me as time went on. Of course, he dies fairly quickly, and we'll get to that. So then we get to them on Vandar 1, the snow planet, and they're about to do the train heist. And I like Val's character in that she's trying to challenge Han. Ironically, Beckett's the one that says never trust anyone. He's the one preaching it over and over. Never trust, never trust, never trust. But yet he trusts Han, and Val doesn't. there's a lot of little things like that where it's like, it doesn't really fit what you're saying about the character here. You're telling me, oh, Beckett's the guy that's never going to trust anybody, but he's the most trusting person I've seen in this movie, minus Han, which that's one of the things that bothers me that we'll get to. But Val doesn't trust. What I would have preferred for Han's motivation in this movie would have been trying to please and make Beckett happy, to be able to join with his group and stay with his group. Because the qi'ra thing doesn't work. They don't work together. The love thing just falls flat. It's the worst. It's just terrible. It doesn't ever work. Ever. qi'ra, Emilia Clarke's a terrible actress, and them two together have zero chemistry. And it doesn't, you're like, let's get back to the other stuff the whole time that this is here. All the, bisexual, pansexual crap with Lando, like I was almost trying to be like, yeah, let's just go that route because at least they're interesting to see together. And qi'ra and them are. Obviously, I didn't want that because it would screw up prior canon. It just wouldn't work. It's messing with characters. Fortunately, they didn't do that route. John Kasdan was just trying to get some Twitter followers by saying that, Lando's pansexual, and if you look at his later tweets, it's like, oh, he would sleep with Twi'leks or Twi'leks. Like, yeah, okay. That, you're just trying to play to that card to get more followers without ever doing anything. I don't like John Kasdan. He got lucky because his dad's a talented writer, and so he got brought in to write, even though he's not very good at writing at all. Going forward, and if you want to disagree with that, look at any of his prior other movies and tell me which one of them are really good writing. Because you can't. Because he's, it's his dad. And so he gets to write because his dad was a writer. So the motivation, instead of trying to get to qi'ra, because immediately he's trying to find qi'ra. That's the immediate motivation we get. And then, oh, there she is immediately after this scene. And then it's like, oh, well, now I want to get away with her. But she's telling you the entire time, I'm not going away. Beckett's telling you the entire time that she's not going away. There's never any hints that she gives that she's going to go away with you. So it's like, oh, yeah, he's an idiot. Han's stupid. Because he just constantly like it would have been better if he would have been like, if you want to play this love story, play it, but have him trying to prove himself to Beckett the entire time. And then while also saying, hey, why won't you come with us? qi'ra, you can come with our group. Like, hey, remember I was going to save you. You're here. Okay, now why won't you come with me? Let's live these adventures. Let's do these things. You can still have the love interest. You don't even have to kill it. But for the motivation, it just looks stupid. And what would work is if you didn't kill off Val here. And Val was constantly there not wanting him around. Or even Beckett, because Beckett was like, I don't know, it was just weird. It didn't seem to work. Val didn't trust him, but Beckett's the one saying, no, you don't trust anyone. So the train heist, though, I thought was very well shot. I thought it was very interesting for the most part. The choreography of it I thought was really cool. The fact that they used the train and then there's a ship trying to get over top. I thought all of those pieces were done fairly well. You get to see some of Han and Chewie working together, again, building up the camaraderie. I thought Rio was fairly interesting and funny, again, as a pilot, as things were going on. Then the Cloud Rider gang showed up. I was okay with it. I liked it. I despised her theme, motif, whatever you want to call it. It just did not fit at all. And again, I complained about the music for the trailers that were played, and I had some idiots making dumb comments down below, which I'll just ignore because what's the point of talking to them and responding? But I said, if the music's different in this movie, I'll comment. And for the most part, I did like the music. I thought he incorporated some of the old themes and adjusted them a little bit, and it worked well. I thought he was desperately trying to create emotion where it wasn't really working, but that's not his fault. They relied too much on the score to try to make emotion. I would say about 70% of it was pretty good. I think it was better than Rogue One, at least on initial viewing. But for Michael Giacchino, That was not his fault. He only had a very small amount of time. He is very talented. He only had a very small amount of time to put that score together because of issues with reshoots and stuff. So I can't blame him for that. But just to give my feelings on it, it was the best of the non-John Williams scores. But this score, Enfys Nest score, was awful. Didn't fit, didn't play out, didn't work. It was bad. Every time it came on, I was like, oh, why is that sound here? Which also works which is the same thing that happens when we go to Dryden Voss' yacht. And in the club, that song that was being played, it was just like, oh, please turn it off. Turn it off, please stop. Those are my complaints about the music, and I will now move forward. But the editing, the pacing, the way things happened, I liked. I thought it set up Enfys Nest fairly well. They should have done it in a way that Val didn't have to die. I think her distrust of Han would have done the movie well moving forward. And I think you could have let her die on Kessel instead. And that would have done more. The other issue is she dies and Rio dies. And there's no emotional effect to the movie at all. This is what I mean by surface level. There's nothing to it. They die. Beckett yells no. And then we're just off to the races and it's never brought up again. There's never anything to it anymore. Beckett's cool from that point on. It's like, whatever. The next emotional point is that Han's going to join in with him. And again, you don't feel it, but John Powell's sure trying to bring on those emotional notes through the score. And it's quite unfortunate that they weren't able to really pull or feel anything emotional. There should have been something happening from that point on. Beckett should have been messed with. He should be like, I don't care. He should be the gunslinger. Look, I'm trying to do the gun. He should have been the gunslinger going in Kessel, firing off everywhere because he doesn't have a will to live anymore because he just lost the only love of his life. And Han should be the one trying to figure things out and protect him because he wants the mentor to be around. And he's the one that's trying to grow up in this world real quick because Beckett now is just gunslinging it. And he's also trying to save himself and prove himself that he's worthwhile for Beckett to keep around. And I think that would have played off a lot better, would have made some intrigue for what was happening. And I think it also would have set up more of an emotional attachment between the two of them so that later when Beckett betrays him, it has an effect on Han, which it doesn't. And then when Han kills Beckett at the end, it would have had more of an emotional attachment. I think that would have done something more for the film. And it didn't. Something along those lines. Or the fact that happens after Val dies later on in the movie. Whatever. Moving forward, she dies. The other thing I had with the Rio thing. One, I like the fact that Rio dying. Rio should have died there because it set up Han flying. Han flying, though, sets up the fact that Rio's dying and he says, Val's right, kid. You don't want to die alone. Han doesn't want to die alone. Right now, the whole time, all he wants is to be with a girl. That doesn't fit. You're not telling this character anything he doesn't already know or feel. It doesn't work. There's nothing to it. It's just a line where it's like, oh, doesn't the Han Solo that we know from A New Hope, he wants to be alone and he's willing to die alone because remember, he's solo. That's what the Empire just told us. He's solo. So he wants to die. He's alone. So, hey, kid, you don't want to die alone. You better find somebody. Except for the entire movie tells us nothing, but he's chasing after qi'ra the entire time. So it doesn't work. It works with the Han the real Han that we know. It doesn't work with this Han. And that's a problem. And just to cut into the Han thing that some people are going to talk about, like, oh, well, he's different, blah, blah, blah. He hasn't had those tough life. I'm sorry. He's called scum rat from Corellia, his entire life has been spent trying to steal from everyone to be able to pay off some debts, to be able to survive and live in an area that's so bad that Dryden Voss, this big villain of the Crimson Gang, he says that he will respect anybody that comes from there, that it's a terrible place. And at the beginning of the movie, when they're trying to leave, Han and qi'ra are talking about there can't be anywhere else in the galaxy that can be as bad as that. So his whole life, the worst place ever. He lives in the worst place ever, but he's cool, man. He's all good. He's not jaded at all. Like, you can't tell me that. Tell me he was raised by a family of royalty, which was kind of what happened in the... Well, he wasn't raised by them, but he did come from royalty in the Legends novels. Or something that things were doing well for him, and he just like, you know, he joined in the empire, and he was going through that, and then it was like, I'm bored of this. Let me go do, join in with, the pirates and smugglers. And then it's like, oh, life's not that good. Life sucks. That's stupid. That would be terrible. My point being, though, that it doesn't work for him to not already be jaded when you're telling me that's his backstory. Pick a kid out of, like, the worst scenario growing up that's 19, that grew up without a family around, that's had to, like, sell drugs or steal and, all this stuff to survive, that everything's gone rough for him. And at 19, he's just like the happiest guy in the world, but then yet at 29, oh, now things suck. It just doesn't quite work. Like, okay, you might be able to find one person, but story-wise, for the character, it shouldn't be that way. He should already not be that trusting. He should already be a bit more street smart. He should already, be a bit more jaded, and he's not. And it's not. If you think that this movie's going to start out with him not jaded and by the end he'll be jaded, that doesn't happen. It's clearly trying to set up more movies, and I don't know if they planned on like, oh, in the third movie of this trilogy we're setting up, then that's where it'll be that he's jaded, because it didn't happen in this movie. And one of the worst things that happens is at the end of the movie, qi'ra says to him, and we saw it in the trailers, I'm the only one that truly knows who you are. And he says, what's that? And she says, a good guy. First off, if you've watched the movie, everyone in the movie would only think that he's a good guy. The shock would be to say that you think that he's a scoundrel. Because the whole time, all he's doing is trying to be the good guy. That's all it is. It's not hidden. That's the worst part of this movie for me, is that it kills a lot of who Han is later. And I don't like it. I don't like that Han is just this, he's the good guy. And what we saw at the beginning of A New Hope was fake. It wasn't that A New Hope was meaningful, that something happened, that he met Luke and he met Leia, and he had grown up in the Empire, so he didn't like it, but he had always stayed away from it. But now with these two people here, and he sees this rebellion and something really happening, and he wants to leave because that's who he is, but it's something meaningful that when he turns around and says, now it's like, oh, that's what you would have expected the whole time, because he was always a good guy. That was one of the first things I said when this movie was announced, was please do not make him the good guy. But he's the good guy. That's all he is. So now Solo is always the good guy, which screws them up because they want to try to make it out like he was always the bad guy, and that's why he screws up Kylo Ren, and he's a bad father, and all this stuff with Leia, and he'll just leave Leia and go back to smuggling because he's always just the bad guy. But now you're trying to tell us he's the good guy. You can't have it both ways, Disney, you group of idiots. But I'm jumping a little bit too far ahead. So they're going through fighting and battling, and of course Han tries to pull away, which doesn't make any sense because there's 4 little speeders trying to pull away, but yet this big ship they stole in the beginning of the movie can't pull 4 speeders. So then Han has to dump it. If you haven't picked it up, I'll do a video on it probably tomorrow. Basically, this whole movie is just kind of setting up what happens with Han in A New Hope. It's just repeating that story, basically. Hence the dumping the cargo, that then now he has a debt on his head and has to run off and pay off. But he's going and he dumps it. Beckett's angry, but then all's cool. And then they go and meet the Crimson Dawn and Dryden Voss and have to agree that, like, oh, by the way, we're going to have to, we're going to have to pay this off. And the terrible music that I already mentioned before. He meets qi'ra, which I already mentioned before. So, where's that motivation going? Why did we have to have all of that scene beforehand? They don't have anything working well together. At least him and Chewbacca had a nice little conversation that they're working at this point. And we have some more of those moments where it's almost fourth wall breaking, where it's just like, really? Where you might as well have just had Dryden Voss look at the camera and say, man, he's a kind of a scoundrel, isn't he? Where he's like, we're going to need, well, if you're going to pull off this Kessel Run thing, you're going to need a fast ship and a brilliant pilot. And Han's like, yeah, I'm brilliant. I'm a brilliant pilot. And he's like, wow, this guy's arrogant, isn't he? Oh, didn't you say Han Solo's cocky and a scoundrel? Well, that's our Han Solo. Why? Because Dryden Voss says so. And then to leverage into that even further, we have the introduction of Lando, which, again, I liked Lando. But then we have Emilia Clarke playing qi'ra that has to walk up and she's like, oh man, this Lando guy, because that's the ship they need. He's attractive. He's stylish. He's got charisma for days. Oh man, he's so amazing. Oh, wow. Awesome. It's just like, oh my God, let the actors speak for themselves. What is this? It's like, it's not like they chose to tell and not show. They're showing and telling. They're doing everything. They're doing everything minus what's that terrible movie that DC did? Suicide Squad. Everything short of Suicide Squad, where they're having like a card pop up with their own theme music played by Fall Out Boy saying what their character is known for, with like, oh, those of you who are fans are going to catch this little reference. Like, it was just say, hey, I know a guy that's, the best smuggler around right now, and then pop to Lando just playing cards, because that was good. Like, those scenes were great. It was doing very well. I did like that when Han sat down to play with him, he won the first hand. He was like, beginner's luck, and then he starts to play him. It very much played along the lines of Mind Harp of the Sharu, with how Lando would trick and play people, that he would pretend that he was lucky. And he would win a few hands, get some money up, and then he would start to lose a little bit, and we kind of skipped through some of that part, but he would start to lose a little bit to make them think that he was really a beginner and win just enough that they wouldn't realize that he's actually a really good player. So I liked the way that started, and there's a lot of little Easter eggs and hints throughout this movie, specifically to Mind Harp of Sharu, which you even have basically Lando doing his own audible book, The Chronicles of Lando Calrissian, which I enjoyed that. There are some good stuff. Like, that's what I'm saying. This isn't a horrible movie. So if you're thinking that I'm just hating on the movie, I'm not. But it's also not a brilliant movie. It's an enjoyable, fun ride for once. And that's why I said, if you're considering boycott and watch it on Netflix, and it'll be an enjoyable time, because this is the bad version of Lucasfilm that I want. Like, when you say, oh, what would be the bad Star Wars movie for me? This would be it. Bad is, I can enjoy it. I can go and watch it, and it's like, oh man, that wasn't terrible to watch. But in the end, it's like, I don't gain anything from it. My Star Wars is something I watch, I enjoy, and it gets better with time. I break it down. There's so many little subtexts and so many little things going on. That ain't happening in this movie. Then you meet the worst character in the movie, L3. She's terrible. Just absolutely awful. She's, the whole time it's just like, oh, why are you doing this? You're just doing this for entertainment. Can't you see that, why are you, fight against your training? Like, okay, for anyone that finds this enjoyable, and this character not the most awful, horrific character, because you're like, oh, it's equal rights, let's get some more of this political crap shoved down your throats the entire time. if you begin to think or talk about, like, because I read an article where somebody was like, finally, Star Wars is stepping up to talk about this injustice. Burn your computer, throw away your phone, throw away your microwave, your refrigerator, your TV, anything that has to do with any form of technology, because you're doing exactly the same type of enslavement. So I don't want to hear your stupid virtue signaling crap. Get over it. Give me a freaking break. This is terrible. This is a stupid line. This is a stupid storyline that does not belong in Star Wars. It has no meaning. Like, I get it. It's always been there. And you can have her make a little comment here and there that there's one self-aware droid that's like, hey, by the way, what the crap's going on here? But the fact, it's endless. It's boom, oh, they don't even serve our kind here. And Lando's like, we need to go. It's like, hey, how do you know I'm going to go to Kessel with you? And he's like, she's like, oh, because you're my overlord. And it's just, and then they're just sitting there talking. He's like, can I get you anything? She's like, equal rights. Like, oh my God. And then she gets there and she starts, oh, how barbaric. Breaks off the thing so that they all start getting free. And then they're just stomping on things, which makes no sense. How did the gonk droid thing get on top of the camp? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it's like, oh, I finally found my calling. Thank God she got shot. Thank the maker that she was shot and it was all done with. She was terrible. There was one moment I mentioned that was funny where I did like the scenes with her and Qi'ra where she kind of acted like, oh, I think Lando likes me, but I'm not into him. That was fine. Like, I liked it. It was just like, that I can't perform when someone's watching me. What? It just didn't work. It was awful. If you liked it, it tells you a little bit about yourself. You're probably subscribed to BuzzFeed and Vox, and you're probably like actually, seriously, legitimately talking about like droid rights and stuff like that. Which, as I said, then get rid of anything that has anything to do with technology, because you're enslaving robots. You idiot. So annoying. It's the same thing like the capitalism stuff of Canto Bight. That's what happens in Kessel, basically. There's nothing happening there. There's nothing meaningful there. You have a blatantly yelling at the camera about like, oh, equal rights, freedom, rebellion. Not legitimate rebellion, that people, but like, oh, we're freeing droids because, they're people too, even though they're not people. And nothing happens. Nothing's really going on. It runs on for much longer than it needs to run on. It's the Canto Bight of this, movie. And it was just enjoyable once it ended. The one benefit is it did add some emotion with Lando, and it did set up, as I did a video before, that it's set up that she ends up becoming part of the Millennium Falcon, and she's the one that basically allows it to be able to navigate so that they can fly through the maelstrom that allows them to get away. One other little thing with the ship that I found interesting, the conversation between Han and Lando, one thing they kind of added that I liked is that Han built the YT freighters on Corellia. And so that's kind of part of his connection, why he really wants it. Later, towards the end of the movie, Lando kind of makes a comment about like, wow, you really got a thing for this movie, you really got a thing with the Falcon, don't you? And Han's like, it's mutual, trust me. And again, that's where it's like, it worked. Like I bought that. It wasn't as good as Han would do it if you want to pick out every little thing. No, it's not. But it was good enough for me. By that point, when they're working together, it was working out well. But it really built the connections of Han with the Falcon and Han and Chewbacca. And I enjoyed both of those. Chewie goes to try to free some Wookiees. The problem with that, like, there's nothing to it again. Like, it couldn't have been his family or something. It was just like, we're going to free Wookiees. And then the Wookiees looked terrible. They were the shaved face. They looked like the Planet of the Apes from 1960s. It just looked weird. Anytime I saw them, it looked awful. It just didn't work. You had the moments where the dice was being handed off again, where she hits Han, and I was like, oh, she's hitting him and she's going to give him a key to unlock the thing. But no, she gives him the dice back. And it's like, oh, he's got the dice back now. Yay. It just, what? And then we finally got to see Chewie rip someone's arms off, which I enjoyed. And it had the little funniest, kind of funny moment with Han where he was like, yeah, that was only suit that fit me, but sure, okay, whatever. That's fine. That was the humor that was like, it's not over the top, but it worked. And it also worked for how Han would be humorous. He's not trying to be humorous. He's like just making little sarcastic quips. And for that, it worked. When they're leaving, her death again, Lando's struggling with it. And there was a nice, you felt the emotion of that. You felt the emotion Lando cared for L3, an annoying droid that at least the benefit for the movie, I will say this, despite having the worst character, I mean, I would rather have Jar Jar. It's equal to Jar Jar in my mind. If when they just pop up, it's like, oh my God, okay, here we go on this. Let's take away from what's happening with the story now. It's just, it's like at least Jar Jar was pandering to kids. This is pandering to people that are going to like try to strike my video down or like dislike it or make stupid comments that people made for The Last Jedi where they're like, it's a great movie because it's political. Yeah, and you're an idiot. Anyways, moving forward. That was really the only parts, but the one benefit was when it happened, even like the characters all around were all like rolling their eyes. So at least there's like, they're at least admitting like, yeah, we're annoying. Even if they don't realize that's what they're doing. You're all annoying. So then moving forward, when they're flying away, you have more emotional connection to L3 and Lando than you had with Beckett and Val, who apparently he's loved forever. But when they're flying away, why did you have to have the Empire showed up? I kind of like the fact that this was a small, toned down kind of heist thing that no one else, there's no Empire. There's nothing else happening here. Why did you need the Empire there? Because you already had a reason for him to go through the Maelstrom and fly through there. Because the coaxium is going, if they don't get it refined quick enough, it's going to blow up. So they've got to go faster. And you've already set that up. So you already have a reason for him to cut through there to make the Kessel run in, 12 parsecs. So why did you have to have all of a sudden the Empire's here? Oh no. Why? It wasn't necessary. So then they run through the Maelstrom. And that's when they start trying to set up some of the coaxium to be able to allow them to fly faster, as well as set up L3 in there to be able to navigate and get along with what's going to happen, which I do love the fact she's forever enslaved in the Falcon now. That's the one great benefit. She's all about freedom. She created herself. She made it where she's not enslaved, but now you're stuck on a ship. That makes me happy. I love that. It just hit me. That's great. So they're flying, and every piece of the Falcon that needs to go to be able to make up for where it's like it was in A New Hope begins to happen. The gun gets broken off because it's not the same gun. The desk on top, my mind's blanking, gets shot off. And then the part that just doesn't make sense to me, they wanted to add more character into it, so they have this monster that begins to chase them. That kind of reminded me of a Phantom Menace when they're trying to get away, and there's always a bigger fish moment. And as they're trying to get away, Han decides to head towards the gravity well, which doesn't make sense to me because his mind says that first, so he shoots the escape pod off and the monster goes after the escape pod. Now it's just me, but if I'm chasing something to eat it because I'm hungry, which only happens like twice a day, I'm going to go for the bigger thing. Especially a ginormous monster. It's not like they looked at the Falcon and they were like, oh, that's going to fill me up. Let me go for the escape pod. But he shoots it off and the monster just follows after the escape pod. And he's like, that's why I did it. Like as if it was a genius idea. No, it was stupid. Like any normal monster would continue chasing the Falcon. Then the Falcon's trying to pull away. He wants to go to the gravity well to be able to get away from the monster. He's going to trick it. But yet you're getting closer to the gravity well and you're able to pull away, but the monster's not. Now, we've seen that the monster's right behind the Falcon. So they're able to run the same speed. The monster is actually catching up to it. And the monster is larger. You would think that the gravity well pulling everything in would be able to pull a smaller object moving at the same speed than a bigger object moving at that same speed. To me, that would make sense. But instead, it doesn't. And everything kind of works out. And you have the same scene where it works, where he kind of makes the cut and turns it like he did at the beginning of the movie. And then he's able to get out. I did like the fact that she thought it was going to work and it kind of died off and started to fall. And then it catches up at the end and flies away. I thought that was pretty cool. It's fitting for the Falcon and how it's always going to go. So then they get there and there's a good little back and forth with him and Lando. And then we have the conversation with qi'ra that I already brought up before that just bothers me, where she's like, you know, you're a good guy, Solo. One thing I said I would bring him up, and I forgot this, that earlier when they were on Kessel, you had two moments where it's like, again, they're just like commentating to the audience. Like, oh, by the way, we didn't write this well enough for you to just see it on your own. We got to tell you, like, oh, this is cool, by the way. Where they go and qi'ra like takes down one of the Pike members, and L3's like, wow, that was awesome. Where did you learn that before? And then Han moves in and he goes and kicks the guy in the nuts and takes him down. And Beckett's like, wow, that was impressive. It's like, oh my Lord. Like, are you trying to just be Deadpool or something? Like, what is this? I don't get this. This doesn't work. This is not. So here yet again, it's like, oh, I'm going to tell you what no one else will know. You're actually a good guy. No, everyone knows. That's all you see. That's all there is, that he's a good guy. The shock would be if anyone thought that he was actually a scoundrel. So that's stupid. And then we get to the other stupid part where it was like Disney, because they think everyone that watches Star Wars is racist and sexist, they thought they had the biggest twist ever. Like, they're like, we're going to do this. And when we do this, this is going to be up there for history. And the twist ending that tops Empire Strikes Back. Where we're just going to, you guys are marauders. You're terrible. And then all of a sudden they take the helmet off and it's a girl. And everyone looks at each other and they're like, oh, it's a girl in a helmet and she's the bad guy. No woman would ever do this. Oh my gosh, you're telling us such shocking things. And like, if you think I'm lying, watch it again. It's take helmet off, pause, pull back. Han looks over at Chewie. They look at each other. They look at qi'ra. They look at Vex. And it goes back to it. It's paused again. And then finally it walks. Like, there's a long pause of like everyone reaction of like, oh my. The most shocking thing they could have ever done in this movie is have made that to be a man. Like, that was the least shocking thing that ever did. Like, this wasn't shocking. It wasn't. You're just idiots, Disney, that think that people look at this and are blown away. Like, no, that's why people like me and a lot of other Star Wars fans, when you made the comment, was like, Aura Singh was killed. I was like, why are we getting Aura Singh anymore? She was an awesome bounty hunter who was female. When the big cameo comes up a little bit later and you say that like, oh, Darth Maul's heading to Dathomir, I'm like, why can't they still be alive? Because the Dathomirian witches are some of the coolest characters, all female villains. It's only you, Disney, that are so terrible with villains, that you create these villains that like, oh, because they're female, it makes them mean anything or matter at all, when it doesn't. You're the only one that sees these stupid identities like as if that matters. It doesn't. The character being cool is what mattered. And so it was just a shock moment that it just showed how stupid Disney is. That like everyone in the movie's looking around, but like the audience watching, it's like, yeah, okay. How about we get to something happening with this movie? So basically they reversed the Cloud Rider gang. if you've read the comics, which I wouldn't be surprised if you hadn't, it's not really worth reading for the Cloud Rider gang. It's back in this like 1977 or 78 was when this comic was one of the earliest comics to come out. And Han goes on a mission, and he ends up kind of getting stuck on this planet. He's trying to make money again. He had money to pay off Jabba from A New Hope, and it gets stolen from him by some pirates. And so he's trying to make money again, and he helps out this village that are being kind of mistreated by the Cloud Rider gang that show up. And so essentially what Enfys Nest tells the story of what happens, it's the opposite. They flipped around, and now the Cloud Rider gang's the group that's helping them out. That they're the good guys. Which, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like a waste. Like, there's not really any villains in this movie. The movie doesn't go Marvel with the humor, but it goes Marvel with the villains. The villains are just kind of like, yeah. Like Dryden Voss, okay, whatever. Enfys Nest, like, it was trying to do some shocks, and then its third act, which I don't like, it sets up many of the issues with Han Solo, and it tries to shock you at every turn, and it just doesn't work. None of them work. They're all seen a million miles away. You got Enfys Nest as a girl. Oh, wow, that's so shocking. You got Tobias Beckett turns on them. Oh my God, that's so shocking. You got Qi'ra decides not to kill Solo to try to kill Dryden Voss. Oh, I never saw that coming. Oh, Qi'ra doesn't go with Han and she ends up leaving him. Like, oh my God. Oh. It's not shocking at all. And people talk about like in the end really picked up. I'm like, you weren't paying any bit of attention if you were surprised by anything that happened in that movie. So then they go and they decide to trick it, and they're gonna Solo being a good guy because he's a good guy. Again, Qi'ra says no one will know, but yet he's always being the good guy. That's like saying no one would realize that Superman's a good guy. Like, that's what they tried to make him like Superman in this, and I just don't like it. So he goes to help. Becca decides he's going to leave, and he's going to show up later. And so they go to take the coaxium to Dryden, and they're going to trick him because they want to give it to the Cloud Rider gang because the Cloud Rider gang's the good guys now. Shocker. And so then when that happens, he's talking to Dryden, and Dryden's been informed by Beckett that this isn't really what it is, that they're trying to trick you. And so he set his army because Dryden, the whole time Beckett's been he's got a whole army. He's got this huge yacht with many, many stories. It's like the Empire State Building. And he's got his own private army. And he's got goons, and he'll send them after you. And he's dangerous. And so that's why Beckett was like, I'm leaving you, Han. I'm not helping you because there's so many people, and there's no way that the Cloud Rider gang can fight them off, even with us. There's no way. And so then he sends 10 people to go stop them. And of course, they're defeated. But then there's like 5 people in the ship with Dryden to protect them. Like, where's this army at? Because you talk about the army, just don't talk about the army. Just don't build it up as this huge big thing when nothing's going to be paid off about it. Nothing happens about it. There's no army. There's no one around. And then it just kind of goes into this thing where it's shock, 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 shock. And it just doesn't really work ever. So they end up leaving. And Han's trying to get Qi'ra to leave. And she's like, you go ahead, I'll come. I'm going to grab these gems first. Which is like the stupidest thing. You couldn't come up with something better. Like, any normal guy that's ready to try to leave with his girl would just be like, all right, cool. Walk over there, slide a hand, like, let me get a handful or two as well in my pockets. All right, let's go. But no, Han's just like, okay, I'm going to leave. And then you have this setup from the beginning of the movie that's just the worst payoff ever, where earlier she was talking to him and she was like, I used to always think about you out on your adventures, and then she just paused. And then there was like this pause for a second. Like, there was no reason for her to pause. It wasn't like Dryden Voss walked up and broke up the conversation. There was this pause, like she couldn't tell him what it was yet. And then Dryden Voss shows up. And then now she found out, I was going to tell you earlier, when I think of the adventures y'all have, I smile. Oh my God. Oh. The best payoff the movie could have had is when the cameo pops up next with Qi'ra talking to Darth Maul. If he would have done like he did in the Clone Wars with Black Sun in them, and he just would have thrown his lightsaber. I know he couldn't do it because it's a hologram, but if he would have thrown it and just cut her head off, and then that would have been the ending, I would have been standing up cheering, yes. But we couldn't have it. So, but anyways, yeah, it did like, oh man, wow, she smiled. That's so amazing. So, okay, the army, he sends his army, which is 10 people. So why is there this big army that everyone talks about? He gets killed. Everyone just walks away. And Qi'ra just is like, I'm the captain now. I always think about that movie with Tom Hanks. I can't think of it now. But yeah, I'm the captain now. He just goes out and tries. She calls Darth Maul and she's like, yeah, I'm the leader now. And she just takes the ship and flies away. Like, no one, like, this is a huge syndicate. And he's dead. And no one's like, yeah, I'd like to challenge you for that spot. Because then I own this ship. Because I think I can beat you, girl. Like, I would be. I'd be all over that. I mean, and then the other thing that just doesn't work is Darth Maul says, you know, she says, I'm the only one that survived when she's talking to Darth Maul. And Darth Maul's like, no, one person could have done this. And she was like, well, I wasn't there, so I don't know. You just said you're the only one that survived it, and now you're saying you weren't there. It can't be both. And so, again, so she leaves. And Han, having just shot Tobias Beckett, I mean, just being traded on by him, sees her just flying away, and it's like, oh, shucks. Ah, gee willikers. Like, there's nothing to it. It's just, that's what I mean. It's like if you don't think and you just watch the movie, it's like, oh, that was kind of enjoyable. Oh, you think about the cameo happening right there, and you're like, oh, that's a cool cameo. And then before you figure out, like, that was dumb, all that was said there, and makes no sense. And why is she the leader now? Why does she all of a sudden have the ship and she can just fly it away and take it on her own? Where is the army that's happening there? Wait a minute, why is Han not caring? Because immediately it hops and they're going to have him and Lando playing Sabacc again, and you finally had the final moment, which I did enjoy that. That was one where I thought they did very well of explaining kind of what we've had in mind of, did he cheat, did he not cheat? You had half the people that were like, if Han cheated to win the Falcon, I'm going to be angry. And you had the other half that's like, Han definitely cheated. It needs to fit with his character. So it was brilliantly done when they played the first time and Lando cheated and Han figured out that he cheated, which, being someone that used to play poker a lot, I definitely understood. Like, I enjoyed the aspect of him explaining how he knew that there's no way he could have that card, because, you know, if you're playing poker and you're playing it in with any form of skill and not just gambling randomly, you count the cards. You understand how many cards have been played in a hand as it's going on, and you realize the percentages of what's likely to pop up. And you would understand if, you know, for instance, 4 of the same cards have been played while you are going before a new deck's been brought in, and you would understand, okay, there's no chance that a king's going to pop up here. And so that's essentially what happened with Lando. So he knew that he was cheating. So when they next go against each other, they fake the angry, which kind of is, again, there's a lot of references. I didn't go through the references. I'll probably go through the references in another video. So if you're wondering, like, you haven't mentioned all these hundreds of references they made, I'll do it in another video. But this is kind of a reference to the Han and Lando thing from Empire Strikes Back. But there Han uses it and plays the thing to be able to pull the card and steal the card from Lando. So later he knows what Lando's going to be expecting, and he can play the hand out and then use the card that Lando was going to have. And he can be like, you know, oh, I won fair and square. So it's like he cheated, but he didn't really cheat. Like, he only cheated because Lando cheated before, and he would have beat him and had the ship to begin with, but he didn't because Lando cheated. So I thought it was brilliant, because he's just sitting there like, oh, fair and square, fair and square. I thought that was done brilliantly. Again, there are some shining moments in this movie. When you think about it, you will remember some really good points. And that's what a lot of people are going to focus on. And that's fine. I'm not telling you to hate it or dislike it. But when you break it down and you're trying to look at the movie, it falls short in many ways. There's a lot of lazy writing in here. There's a lot of unnecessary things happening. There's a lot of failed character development. There's a lot of characters, the way that they're told to be, not acting the way they should be. The biggest issue I have is Han being too good of a guy. It just screws up the way that the character's supposed to be going forward. They try to set it up as if it's like foreshadowing his heroicism in A New Hope, but really all it does is just undermine it and ruin it. And that's my biggest problem with the movie, is how that, if you watch this in order of canon timeline, with Disney included with the Lucas timeline, it ruins A New Hope. But if you don't allow it to ruin Hope and you don't think deeper about it, then it's just a fun adventure film with Solo, Chewie, and Han. I don't know if it says a lot about Disney. It does say a lot about Disney, that the fact that exists and I'm not super angry about it, is maybe just my expectations being so incredibly low. But I don't know. Maybe it's I haven't seen it enough, because I'm not trying to, really help out Disney with the finances, which, speaking of, came out to $14.1 million for the Thursday night showing, which the closest estimate I could really find is recently Thor Ragnarok did $14.5 million on Thursday, which is funny. We did less than Thor Ragnarok, which Thor was not a big property really heading into that point, even though the prior advertising had kind of promoted it fairly well. Thor Ragnarok ended up doing $122 million over the first weekend, which means you can kind of estimate that most likely this movie is going to do $120 million in the opening box office. When I was asked before, I kind of mentioned, I thought it would do between $120 and $150 million, which is a wide thing, so it's not like I'm a genius for guessing that right. But I said if it got down to $120 million, that would tell a huge story of people's reactions and true feelings after The Last Jedi. Like, to me, even though it's $120 million, it's a big number. That, to me, seems like a lot of people boycotted and did not like this film. Did not like The Last Jedi. And it's a show of The Last Jedi. A lot of people are trying to say, is this fatigue? It's not. It's people being angry about The Last Jedi. And if it goes down to $120 million, then that tells a lot. Because Rogue One, that had no characters that we even knew in it, that were following a story that no one really wanted before, now ends up beating by a heavy margin Solo for opening weekend in the summer. That's a problem. You got issues happening there, which probably means it'll come out to about, I would guess, around 800 to 850 million overall, which again is going to be the lowest. You did a Solo movie that didn't crack $1 billion. That's an issue. I think I kind of covered everything, though. I'm sure I missed a lot. I just kind of ranted on and talked about all my feelings and stuff. I will break down further and further with videos kind of daily going forward, like I did with The Last Jedi. I'll also be going through the new book that just came out, which is Most Wanted, although I hate the thought of going through that because it's about qi'ra and Han. But I'll also be going through Paradise Snare and Mind Harp of the Sharu, the Legends novels as well. I started doing it and I stopped because I realized that this movie is going to be going over the same time period, and it's going to be discussing there's a lot of Easter eggs to it, which were kind of cool. So we'll go through it now if you want to. I'll be going through it. And also, I do have an Apple podcast now. For those of you, I've had a few people that's asked about it because my videos tend to be a little bit longer, like this one will be. If you prefer to listen to it on a podcast, I do have the podcast. I have a link down below. I believe. I think I know how to find the link. I just got it up. But if not, you can just search it on Apple Podcasts and just type in Carbonite Chat, and it'll be there. And also, I'll have a link to my TeePublic page down below if you like any of the shirt designs that I have. I've got a few, and that'll be absolutely awesome. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and opinions on the movie down below. And if there's any questions or thoughts about certain things for me to do as a video to talk further on the topics of this movie, I've got a few that I kind of got in mind, but I would love to hear your opinions. I look forward to discussing it and getting some of other people's thoughts as well. I haven't really watched any videos or anything since this movie's been out, so I don't know as much about other people's feelings. I've heard, my brother told me that it's like 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. But I look forward to hearing that. I look forward to those of you who have watched it. and finding out those of you who are not watching it. But this has been long enough, and I'll be doing some more videos coming up shortly on the topic. So as far as that goes, thank you very much for watching, and never forget, you Nerf herders, I love you.